The morning sun rose over Phoenix, Arizona on June 14, 2157. It was a beautiful day. Children walked to school with backpacks bouncing on their shoulders. Parents drove to work while drinking coffee and listening to the radio. Old people sat on their porches and watched the world go by. Nobody knew that this would be the last normal morning they would ever see. High above the earth, hidden behind the moon, a massive alien warship waited. The Volcarian Empire had ruled the galaxy for 6,000 years. They had conquered over 100 different species and controlled thousands of planets. When their scouts discovered that humans had sent their first ships beyond their solar system, the Emperor decided to send a message. He wanted to show these primitive creatures what happened to species that stepped out of line. Hi, Commander Zorath sat in his command chair and looked at the blue planet below. He felt nothing but contempt for the tiny beings that lived there. To him, they were insects. Less than insects. They were nothing. Target the largest population center in the region called North America. Zorath ordered his weapons officer. Yes, Commander. Firing in 30 seconds. The plasma cannons charged with a deep humming sound. Green light gathered at the front of the warship. Then, without any warning to the people below, death fell from the sky. The bombardment lasted 4 minutes and 37 seconds. That was all it took to erase a city of over 2 million people from existence. When the smoke and fire cleared, there was nothing left but a smoking crater where Phoenix used to be. 70,000 Americans died in those 4 minutes. Mothers holding their babies. Children sitting in classrooms. Doctors trying to save lives. All gone in a flash of green light. The world watched in horror as news helicopters flew over the destruction. There were no survivors to rescue. There were no buildings to search. There was only ash and melted rock where a great American city once stood. President Catherine. Alice received the news while eating breakfast in the White House. She dropped her coffee cup and it shattered on the floor. For a long moment, she could not speak. Then her shock turned to cold, hard anger. Within an hour, she addressed the nation from the underground bunker beneath the White House. Her face was pale, but her voice was steady. My fellow Americans, she began. This morning, an alien force attacked our country. They destroyed the city of Phoenix. They murdered 70,000 of our citizens. They did this without warning, without provocation, and without mercy. She paused and looked directly into the camera. They believe we are weak. They believe we will cower in fear and beg for mercy. They are wrong. Dead wrong. The United States of America does not bow to tyrants, whether they come from across the ocean or across the stars. We will find those responsible, and we will make them pay. At Camp Pendleton in California, Sergeant Major Danny Reyes gathered his Marines in the main briefing room. Danny was 45 years old, with gray hair at his temples and scars on his hands from 20 years of combat. He had fought in 3 wars and trained thousands of young Marines. He had seen terrible things in his life, but nothing had prepared him for this. Listen up, Danny said, his deep voice filling the room. By now you all know what happened. Some of you had family in Phoenix. Some of you had friends. I want you to hold on to that pain. Remember it, because we are going to need it. He walked slowly in front of the assembled Marines, looking each one in the eye. Those aliens killed our people because they thought we could not fight back. They thought we were weak little creatures who would run and hide. They made a mistake. A very big mistake. Because they just made enemies of the United States Marine Corps. Private First Class Katie Morgan sat in the 3rd row, her hands clenched into fists. She was 22 years old, with short brown hair and green eyes that now burned with barely controlled rage. Her grandmother had lived in Phoenix. A grandmother who had raised her after her parents died in a car accident. Her grandmother who had taught her to be strong and never give up. Katie had tried calling her all morning. The phone just rang and rang. She knew her grandmother was gone. She knew it in her heart. And she knew she would make someone pay for taking her away. After the briefing, Danny found Katie sitting alone outside the barracks. She was staring at her phone, at a photo of an old woman with kind eyes and white hair. "Morgan," Danny said, sitting down beside her. "I heard about your grandmother. I am sorry." Katie did not look up. "She survived 2 cancers, Sergeant Major. 2 cancers. Beat them both. And then some alien monster just burned her to nothing. Like she did not matter. Like none of them mattered." "They mattered," Danny said quietly. "Every single one of them mattered. And that is exactly why we are going to war." Katie finally looked at him. Her eyes were red from crying, but her jaw was set with determination. "When do we leave?" "Soon. Real soon." Deep beneath Cheyenne Mountain in Colorado, General Marcus Cole activated the most secret program in American history. It was called Project Prometheus, and it had been running for over 100 years. Ever since a crashed alien vessel was discovered in the desert in 1982. For decades, the brightest scientists in America had studied that crashed ship. They learned its secrets. They figured out how its engines worked. They built copies of its weapons. And they had constructed, in secret facilities hidden across the country, a fleet of warships capable of traveling faster than light. The aliens had made a terrible mistake. They thought they were attacking a primitive species that had never seen advanced technology. They did not know that America had been preparing for this day for over a century. General Cole stood in the command center, surrounded by screens showing the status of the hidden fleet. Captain Lisa Dunn, his aide, handed him a report. "Sir, all 12 vessels are ready for combat. Crews are boarding now. We can launch within 72 hours. Cole nodded slowly. He was 60 years old with white hair and a face lined by years of stress and responsibility. He had spent his entire career preparing for a war he hoped would never come. Now it was here. "Good," he said. "In 72 hours, we take the fight to them. Sir, we only have 12 ships. Our intelligence suggests they have thousands." Cole turned to look at her. There was no fear in his eyes, only cold determination. "Captain, I have studied military history my entire life. Do you know what I learned? Numbers do not win wars. Courage wins wars. Determination wins wars. And nobody in this galaxy is more determined than an American who has just watched his people get murdered." He turned back to the screens. "Tell the fleet to prepare for launch. We are going to teach these aliens a lesson they will never forget." Across America, military bases came alive with activity. Soldiers packed their gear. Pilots checked their aircraft. Sailors reported to their ships. The greatest military power in human history was waking up, and it was angry that the Valkorian Empire had ruled the galaxy for 6,000 years. They had no idea what was coming for them. Emperor Malachar sat on his golden throne in the heart of the Valkorian Empire. His palace floated above the capital world, a massive structure of crystal and metal that had taken 1,000 years to build. He was ancient by human standards, over 800 years old, kept alive by technology that humans could not imagine. He had ruled the empire for 3 centuries and had never known defeat. When his advisors told him that the humans were preparing a military response, he laughed. It was a cold, cruel sound that echoed through the throne room. "These creatures live on one small planet," Malachar said. "They've only just discovered how to leave their own solar system. And they think they can challenge us? Let them come. It will be amusing to watch them die." His advisors bowed and agreed with everything he said. That was their job. Nobody ever told the emperor he was wrong. Nobody ever suggested that maybe, just maybe, he was making a terrible mistake. On the other side of the galaxy, the USS Constitution prepared for launch. It was humanity's first true warship, built in secret over 20 years using technology taken from the crashed alien vessel. The ship was not beautiful. It was not elegant. It was a brutal machine designed for one purpose: killing. Commander Pete Sullivan walked through the corridors of his ship, checking on his crew. Pete was 40 years old with broad shoulders and calm gray eyes. He had spent 15 years in the Navy before being recruited for this secret program. He had trained for 10 more years for a mission he hoped would never happen. Now it was here, and he was ready. The Constitution carried 200 Marines, 50 Navy personnel, and a handful of Army specialists. Every single one of them was a volunteer. Every single one of them knew they might not come home. They did not care. They had seen the footage from Phoenix. They had heard the screams. They wanted revenge. Lieutenant Amy Chun stood at her station on the bridge, checking the navigation systems. She was 28 years old, small and quiet, but she was the best navigator in the fleet. She had memorized the star charts they had stolen from the crashed alien vessel. She knew exactly where to find the enemy. "The course is plotted, Commander," Amy reported. "We can reach the nearest Valkorian outpost in 3 days." Pete nodded. "Good work, Lieutenant. Keep the coordinates locked in." He turned to address his crew through the ship's communication system. "This is Commander Sullivan. In a few hours, we will launch on a mission that many people think is impossible. We have one ship against an empire that controls thousands of planets. We have 250 people against armies of millions. By any reasonable measure, we should not stand a chance." He paused for a moment. But here is what those reasonable measures do not account for. They do not account for the fact that we are Americans. They do not account for the fact that we have been fighting impossible wars and winning them for over 400 years. They do not account for the fact that we are not fighting for conquest or glory. We are fighting for justice. We are fighting for the 70,000 innocent people who were murdered in Phoenix. In the cargo bay, Corporal Rick Martinez listened to the speech with his squad. Rick was 30 years old, short and muscular, with a thick mustache and a quick smile. But he was not smiling now. His cousin had died in Phoenix. His cousin who had just gotten married. His cousin who had been expecting a baby. "You know what I think?" Rick said to his squad mates. "I think those aliens made the biggest mistake of their lives. They could have left us alone. They could have just watched us from far away and let us do our thing. But no, they had to come here and kill our people. They had to make it personal." Private Katie Morgan nodded in agreement. She had been assigned to Rick's squad after her exceptional scores in training. She was the youngest member of the unit, but also one of the most determined. "My grandmother always said that you should never start a fight," Katie said. "But you should always finish one." "Smart woman," Rick replied. She was. She really was. Deep in the ship's laboratory, Dr. Hannah Pierce worked on her greatest invention. Hannah was 35 years old with messy red hair and glasses that were always slightly crooked. She was a physicist from MIT, one of the smartest people on the planet. And she had spent 15 years developing weapons that could challenge the Valkorian Empire. Her masterpiece was called the Kinetic Impactor. It was simple in concept but devastating in execution. Take a rock. Make it move very, very fast. Hit something with it. The Valkorians had built their entire military around energy shields. Their ships could stop lasers, plasma, and any kind of beam weapon. But they had never faced an enemy that threw rocks at nearly the speed of light. A single kinetic impactor the size of a school bus, moving at 30% of light speed, could punch through any shield and crack a planet in half. The beauty of it is how simple it is, Hannah explained to Commander Sullivan during a briefing. They have been fighting wars with energy weapons for thousands of years. They have gotten very good at stopping energy weapons. But mass moving at relativistic speeds? They have no defense against that. It would be like trying to stop a bullet with a flashlight. Sullivan studied the weapon specifications on his tablet. How many of these impactors do we have? 12 ready to fire. We can make more once we reach the asteroid belt near their outpost. Good. Very good. Back on Earth, the United Nations held an emergency meeting. Representatives from every nation argued about how to respond to the alien attack. Some wanted to surrender and hope for mercy. Others wanted to wait and try to negotiate. But the American representative, Secretary of Defense Raymond Burke, had a different message. "We are not asking for permission," Burke told the Assembly. "We are informing you of what we are going to do. The United States will launch a counterattack against the Valkorian Empire. Any nation that wishes to join us is welcome. Any nation that tries to stop us will be ignored." The room erupted in argument. The Russian ambassador stood up. "This is madness. You will bring destruction upon all of us." Burke turned to face him. "Sir, 70,000 of our people are already dead. Destruction has already come. The only question now is whether we fight back or lie down and die." The American fleet launched 3 days after the attack on Phoenix. 12 ships carrying 30,000 soldiers flew into the darkness between the stars. They were headed toward an enemy that had conquered 100 worlds and never known defeat. Sergeant Major Danny Reyes stood at a viewport on the Constitution, watching Earth shrink behind them. He had fought many battles in his life, but never one like this. Never one where the stakes were so high. Katie Morgan joined him at the viewport. They stood in silence for a long moment, watching their home planet become just another star in the sky. "What are you thinking, Sergeant Major?" Katie asked. "I am thinking about all the people back home who are counting on us. I am thinking about all the families who lost someone in Phoenix. I am thinking about how we are going to make this right. Do you think we can win?" Danny turned to look at her. His face was hard, but his eyes were kind. "I think we do not have a choice. Winning is the only option. Because if we lose, there will be nobody left to try again." Katie nodded slowly. She understood. They all understood. The Constitution flew on through the darkness, carrying its cargo of angry, determined, grieving Americans toward an enemy that had made the worst mistake in the history of the galaxy. They had made humanity angry, and they were about to learn why that was a very bad idea. The Valkorian outpost of Kethra 7 floated in the darkness of space, a massive station orbiting a dead moon at the edge of the Empire. It was home to 10,000 Valkorian soldiers and 30 warships. Commander Zorath, the same officer who had ordered the attack on Phoenix, had been sent there as a reward for his success. Zorath sat in his command center, reviewing tribute reports from conquered worlds. He was bored. Nothing exciting ever happened at this outpost. It was just a simple garrison duty, watching over a quiet corner of the Empire. His junior officer, a young Valkorian named Velis, approached him nervously. "Commander, our sensors have detected an unknown vessel approaching the outpost." Zorath did not even look up from his reports. "Destroy it." "Sir, we are having difficulty tracking it. The vessel is small and moving in an unusual pattern." Now Zorath looked up, annoyed. "Then send 3 ships to intercept it. I do not want to be bothered with minor details." "Yes, Commander." 3 Valkorian warships broke formation and moved to intercept the unknown vessel. They were sleek, elegant ships with powerful weapons and strong shields. Each one was crewed by 500 trained warriors. They had destroyed countless enemies in their long service to the Empire. They never saw the rocks coming. The kinetic impactors struck at 30% of light speed. There was no warning. There was no chance to react. One moment the 3 warships were flying through space. The next moment, they were expanding clouds of debris and fire. On the bridge of the USS Constitution, Lieutenant Amy Chun reported the results with quiet satisfaction. 3 enemy vessels destroyed, Commander. Direct hits, no survivors. Commander Pete Sullivan nodded. Good shooting. Now target their shield generators. The Constitution had approached Kethris 7 using the dead moon as cover, hiding in its shadow until they were close enough to strike. Dr. Hannah Pierce had calculated the attack angles perfectly. The Valkorians had never seen anything like this. Their sensors were designed to detect energy weapons, not chunks of rock moving at impossible speeds. The second wave of kinetic impactors tore through the station's shield generators. Massive explosions ripped across the surface of Kethris 7, exposing the interior to the vacuum of space. Alarms screamed throughout the station as emergency bulkheads slammed shut. Shields are down, Commander, Amy reported. The station is vulnerable. Sullivan turned to the communication officer. Tell the Marines they are go for assault. In the cargo bay, Sergeant Major Danny Rias gathered his Marines for the final briefing. They stood in rows, 200 warriors in powered combat armor, holding weapons that could punch through steel walls. Their faces were hidden behind helmets, but Danny could feel their determination. This is it, Danny said. The station has 10,000 enemy soldiers. We have 200. That means each of you needs to kill 50 of them. Anyone here think that is too many? Nobody spoke. Good. Remember what these creatures did to Phoenix. Remember why we are here. We going hard, we going fast, and we do not stop until every last one of them is dead or surrendered. Understood? Sir. Yes, sir. The response was thunder in the cargo bay. Katie Morgan checked her rifle one last time. Her hands were steady. Her heart was calm. She had trained for this moment for months. Now it was finally here. Corporal Rick Martinez slapped her shoulder. Stay close to me, Morgan. Watch your corners, keep moving, and do not hesitate. Hesitation gets you killed. Got it, Corporal. The landing craft launched from the Constitution in a swarm, 20 small vessels carrying 8 Marines each. They crossed the distance to the station in seconds, their armored hulls deflecting the desperate fire from Valkorian Point defense guns. Katie's craft hit the station with a grinding crunch. The cutting laser activated, slicing through the outer hull like butter. Cold air rushed out as the seal was breached. Then the Marines poured through. Katie was third through the breach, right behind Rick. The corridor beyond was dark, lit only by red emergency lights. She saw movement ahead and fired without thinking. 2 Valkorian soldiers fell, their strained bodies crumpling to the deck. Contact front, Rick called out. Push forward. The Marines advanced through the station like a tide of death. The Valkorians tried to stop them. They really tried. But they had never faced an enemy like this. Their military doctrine was built on keeping enemies at a distance, using superior technology to win battles without ever getting close. When the humans came through the walls and started shooting at point-blank range, they panicked. Danny led his squad toward the engineering section. If they could shut down the main reactor, the station would lose power and the surviving Valkorians would be helpless. Sergeant Major. Enemy concentration ahead, reported Private Luis Garcia, checking his scanner. Looks like 50+ hostiles behind a barricade. Danny studied the corridor ahead. The Valkorians had set up a defensive position with heavy weapons pointing at the only approach. It was a good position. A smart position. Grenades, Danny ordered. Everyone throw on my mark. 8 grenades flew through the air and landed behind the barricade. The explosions were deafening in the confined space. Danny was moving before the smoke cleared, his rifle firing in short, controlled bursts. The Valkorian defenders were dead or dying. Danny stepped over their bodies without a second glance. In the command center, Commander Zorath watched his station fall apart. The tactical display showed human forces advancing through every section. His soldiers were dying by the hundreds. His ships were burning in space. "This is impossible," he whispered. "This cannot be happening." His aide Velis stood beside him with terror in his eyes. "Commander, we should evacuate. The humans will be here soon." "No." Zorath drew his ceremonial blade. "I am a warrior of the Valkorian Empire. I do not run from primitives." The doors to the command center exploded inward. Danny walked through the smoke with his marines behind him. He saw Zorath standing there with his blade raised and stopped. Slowly, Danny removed his helmet. He wanted this creature to see his face. He wanted it to know exactly who had come for it. "You killed 70,000 of my people," Danny said. His voice was quiet but filled with cold fury. "Women, children, old people who had never hurt anyone. You burned them to ash because you thought we were weak." Zorath tried to speak, but Danny kept talking. "You made a mistake. A very big mistake. Because Americans do not forget. We do not forgive. And we do not stop until justice is done." "You are insects," Zorath hissed. "You cannot defeat the Empire. Even if you take this station, 100 more will come. 1,000 more. You have achieved nothing." "Maybe," Danny said. "But today is not about defeating your empire. Today is about making you pay for what you did." He raised his rifle. "This is for Phoenix." The shot echoed through the command center. Zorath fell, his ancient body crumpling to the deck. He stared up at Danny with dying eyes, still unable to believe what had happened. "How?" he whispered with his last breath. "How can you fight like this?" Danny looked down at him without pity. "Because we are Marines. And you should have done your homework." 3 hours later, Kethra 7 was silent. 250 humans had defeated 10,000 Valkorian soldiers. 30 enemy warships drifted as wreckage in space. It was the first defeat the Valkorian Empire had suffered in over 1,000 years. Katie Morgan walked through the ruins of the station, stepping over alien bodies. She felt no joy, no satisfaction, just a cold emptiness where her rage had been. Rick found her standing in what had been the station's observation deck, looking out at the stars. "You did good today, Morgan. Your grandmother would be proud." Katie was silent for a long moment. Then she spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. "It is not enough. 70,000 people, Rick. This was only the beginning." "I know," Rick said. "But it is a start. And sometimes a start is all you need." On the Constitution, Commander Sullivan sent a message back to Earth. It was short and simple. Kethra 7 has fallen. The enemy has learned that humanity fights back. More to follow. Earth received the message 12 hours later. When President Ellis read it to the nation, people wept with joy and relief. But in the halls of the Valkorian Empire, the news was received very differently. Emperor Malachar read the report 3 times before he could believe it. Then he screamed with rage and threw his tablet against the wall. The primitives had drawn first blood. They would pay for that. They would all pay. The first phase of the battle went exactly as War Admiral Desix expected. Human ships darted out from the asteroid belt, fired their weapons, and retreated before his superior firepower could respond. They were like mosquitoes, annoying but not threatening. Desix watched the tactical display with cold patience. "They are trying to draw us in, to break our formation. We will not fall for such obvious tricks." "Yes, Admiral," his officers responded. But the humans were not trying to trick him. They were waiting. As the Valkorian fleet passed Mars orbit, hidden weapons activated throughout the asteroid belt. Dr. Hannah Pierce had spent weeks placing kinetic impactors on hundreds of asteroids, programming them to fire at exactly the right moment. Now that moment had come. Over 100 rocks, the size of school buses, accelerated to 30% of light speed. They struck the Valkyrian formation from every direction, punching through shields that had never been designed to stop physical objects moving that fast. Essex watched in horror as his display filled with explosions. Ship after ship vanished, destroyed in an instant by weapons they could not see coming. "What is happening?" he demanded. "Sir, the asteroids, they are weapons. The humans weaponized the entire asteroid belt. Over 100 Valkyrian ships were destroyed or crippled in the opening minutes. The perfect formation dissolved into chaos as captains tried to maneuver away from the deadly rocks. And then the human fleet attacked. Admiral Sullivan had positioned his 62 ships in small groups throughout the belt, hidden among the rocks and debris. Now they emerged, striking the scattered Valkyrian vessels at close range where their weapons were most effective. "All ships, engage," Sullivan ordered. "Remember your training. Hit them hard and keep moving." The USS Constitution led the charge, kinetic cannons firing in rapid succession. Each hit tore massive holes in Valkyrian hulls. Each explosion was another small victory. Sergeant Major Danny Reyes stood in the assault bay of the Constitution, surrounded by his Marines. Their mission was simple: board enemy ships and take them intact if possible. "We have practiced this 1,000 times, Danny told his people. "Now we do it for real. Stay focused, stay together, and make them pay for what they did to Phoenix." "Semper Fi, Sergeant Major." The Marines roared back. Their transport launched toward a Valkyrian command cruiser whose shields had been damaged by kinetic fire. Danny could see the massive ship through the viewport, flames pouring from holes in its hull. 30 seconds to contact, the pilot reported. Danny turned to Sergeant Katie Morgan. She was standing with her squad, rifle ready, face calm behind her helmet. "You ready, Morgan?" "Born ready, Sergeant Major." The transport hit the cruiser's hull with a grinding crunch. Cutting lasers activated, slicing through the alien metal. Cold air rushed out as the seal was breached. Danny was through first, his rifle already firing. The corridor beyond was full of Valkyrian soldiers trying to form a defensive line. They were too slow. The Marines cut through them like a knife through butter, moving with the speed and precision that had become their trademark. "Engineering is 3 levels down," Danny ordered. "Martinez, take your team and secure the bridge. Morgan, you are with me." "Copy that," Corporal Rick Martinez replied, leading his squad toward the front of the ship. Danny and Katie pushed deeper into the cruiser, fighting through every corridor. The Valkyrian defenders fought hard, but they could not match the ferocity of humans who had lost everything. Katie kicked open a door and found herself face to face with a Valkyrian officer. He raised his weapon, but she was faster, putting 2 rounds into his chest before he could pull the trigger. "Clear," she reported, stepping over the body. They reached engineering 7 minutes after breaching the hull. The Valkyrian engineers surrendered without a fight, raising their hands and backing away from the controls. "Smart choice," Danny said. He turned to his communications officer. "Tell the Constitution that this ship is ours." All across the battlefield, similar scenes played out. Human ships swarmed around the Valkyrian fleet, striking and retreating, never giving the enemy a chance to use their superior numbers effectively. War Admiral Essex watched his tactical display with growing despair. He had lost 200 ships in the first hour. His formations were shattered. His carefully planned strategy was in ruins. How is this possible? He whispered. His aide Carnes stood beside him, pale with fear. "Admiral, we should consider withdrawal. We can regroup and retreat from primitives." "They are not primitives, Admiral. They are something else entirely." Essex looked at his display again. The humans were not just fighting. They were hunting. Every engagement was designed to cause maximum damage while minimizing risk to themselves. They were patient and methodical, and utterly without mercy. In that moment, Essex understood what Emperor Malachor had failed to grasp. These creatures had evolved on a death world. Their entire history was war. They had been fighting each other for thousands of years, perfecting the art of killing, and now all that deadly knowledge was focused on the Valkorian Empire. "Signal the fleet," Essex said quietly. "Begin withdrawal." "Admiral, you heard me. We withdraw. This battle is lost." The surviving Valkorian ships turned and fled, their engines carrying them away from Sol System at maximum speed. Behind them, they left over 300 wrecked vessels and nearly 1,000,000 dead soldiers. Humanity had won. On the bridge of the Constitution, Admiral Sullivan watched the enemy retreat. His crew cheered around him, hugging each other, some crying with relief. "Casualty reports coming in, sir," Lieutenant Amy Chun said. Her voice was soft despite the victory. "We lost 32 ships, 18,000 personnel." Sullivan closed his eyes. 18,000 lives. Sons and daughters, mothers and fathers, friends and lovers. Make sure every name is recorded, every single one. They died defending their home. They deserve to be remembered. "Yes, sir." On the captured Valkorian cruiser, Danny gathered his Marines in the observation deck. They had lost 11 people in the assault. 11 more names for the memorial. Katie stood apart from the others, looking out at the stars. Earth was visible in the distance, a small blue dot that held everything she loved. Danny walked over to stand beside her. "What are you thinking, Morgan?" "That this was just the beginning. They will come back, bigger, angrier, more determined than ever." "Probably," Danny agreed. "And we will be waiting." "Damn right we will." On Earth, the news of victory spread within hours. People poured into the streets, cheering and crying and holding each other. Church bells rang. Fireworks exploded. For one brief moment, all of humanity was united in joy and relief. President Katherine Ellis addressed the nation from the White House lawn. "Today, we proved something to the galaxy," she said. "We proved that humanity will not go quietly into the night. We proved that attacking us carries a price. And we proved that when we stand together, nothing in the universe can defeat us." At the Phoenix Memorial, workers added a new section. Names of those who had died defending Earth, carved in the same granite as those who had been murdered in the attack. 70,000 names, plus 18,000 more. A monument to loss. A monument to courage. Katie visited the memorial a week after the battle. She walked among the names until she found her grandmother's. For a long moment, she just stood there, remembering. "We did it, Grandma," she whispered. "We made them pay. And we are not done yet." In the heart of the Valkorian Empire, the news was received very differently. Emperor Malachor screamed with rage when he learned of the defeat. He executed a dozen advisors who had promised him easy victory. He ordered the construction of a new fleet, twice as large as the one that had been destroyed. But in his heart, a cold seed of doubt had taken root. He had awakened something terrible, something that could not be put back to sleep. Other species in the Empire heard the news as well. Slaves who had bowed to Valkorian rule for centuries began to whisper. If the humans could resist, perhaps they could too. Perhaps the Empire was not as invincible as it claimed. The first rebellions began within months. Small uprisings on distant planets. Nothing the Empire could not handle. Nothing, though. But they were a sign of things to come. War Admiral Essex returned to the capital in disgrace. He expected to be executed. Instead, the Emperor summoned him for a private audience. "Tell me," Malachor said. "Tell me everything about these humans. I need to understand them." Essex thought for a long moment before answering. "They are not like any species we have conquered. They do not fight for territory or resources or glory. They fight because they believe in something. Freedom, justice, the idea that every life has value. These beliefs make them dangerous. Because a soldier who fights for something is always more dangerous than one who fights for nothing. Malachar considered this. Can they be defeated? I do not know, Your Majesty. Perhaps not. But I know this. It will cost us more than we ever imagined. These humans, they do not know how to surrender. They do not know how to give up. They will fight until the last one of them is dead. And they will take a very large number of us with them. The war was far from over. More battles would come. More sacrifices would be demanded. More heroes would rise and fall. But one thing had been established beyond all doubt. But they were alone in their determination to never, ever kneel. 70,000 Americans had died in Phoenix. Their deaths. The news of Kethra 7 spread through the Valkorian Empire like wildfire. For the first time in living memory, the mighty empire had lost a battle. Not to another great power. Not to a coalition of rebel worlds. To a single species from a single planet that most Valkorians had never heard of. Emperor Malachar called an emergency council in his throne room. His advisors stood before him, trembling with fear. They knew what happened to people who deliver bad news to the emperor. Tell me how this happened, Malachar said. His voice was quiet, which was more frightening than if he had been shouting. Tell me how a primitive species with one planet defeated a garrison of 10,000 soldiers. War Admiral Desik stepped forward. He was the most accomplished military commander in the Empire, a veteran of 100 campaigns who had never known defeat. He was also the only one brave enough to speak the truth. Your Majesty, we underestimated them. We assumed that because their technology was inferior, their warriors would be inferior as well. We were wrong. Their attack was well planned and perfectly executed. They used weapons we have never seen before. Physical projectiles moving at relativistic speeds. Our shields could not stop them. Then find shields that can stop them, Malachar snapped. That may take years, Your Majesty. Our entire military infrastructure is built around energy weapons. Adapting to a completely different threat will require. I do not want excuses. Malachar slammed his fist on the arm of his throne. I want these creatures destroyed. Mobilize the Third Fleet. Send every ship we have. I want their planet turned to glass. Desik bowed his head. As you command, Your Majesty. The Third Fleet was the largest military force in the Empire. 500 warships carrying 2 million soldiers. It was enough to conquer entire star systems. Desik had led it to victory dozens of times. But as he prepared for this new campaign, he felt something he had not felt in centuries. He studied the battle reports from Kethra 7 over and over. The human tactics were brilliant. They had used surprise, speed, and aggression to overcome a much larger force. They had shown no fear and asked for no mercy. They had fought like demons. These are not primitives, Desik said to his aide, a young officer named Corinth. These are warriors. Perhaps the most dangerous warriors we have ever faced. Sir, surely you do not believe they can stand against the Third Fleet. I believe we should not underestimate them again. That mistake has already cost us 10,000 soldiers. I will not let it cost us more. On Earth, humanity prepared for the counterattack they knew was coming. The victory at Kethra 7 had bought them time, but not much. Intelligence suggested the Valkorians would respond with overwhelming force. General Marcus Cole stood before the United Nations Security Council, presenting the defense plan. We have 6 weeks before the enemy fleet arrives, Cole said. In that time, we need to build as many ships as possible, train as many soldiers as possible, and prepare defenses throughout the solar system. How many ships can we build in 6 weeks? asked the British representative. If every nation contributes their resources, perhaps 50 more. Added to the 12 we already have, that gives us 62 vessels. The room fell silent. 62 ships against 500. That is suicide, the French representative said. We should negotiate. Sue for peace while we still can. Cole shook his head. With respect, sir, you do not negotiate with someone who just murders 70,000 of you citizens. The Valkyrians do not want peace. They want submission. And Americans do not submit. Secretary of Defense Raymond Burke stood up to support Cole. The general is right. We have one chance to survive this. One chance to show the galaxy that humanity will not be pushed around. If we surrender now, we become slaves forever. If we fight, we might die. But at least we die on our feet. The vote was close, but in the end, humanity chose to fight. Factories across the world switched to military production. Car plants started building weapons. Shipyards designed for cargo vessels churned out warships. Every nation contributed what they could. China sent engineers. Russia sent raw materials. Japan sent advanced electronics. Europe sent soldiers, but the United States led the charge. Because it was their people who had died. Their city that had been destroyed. Their revenge that needed to be taken. Sergeant Major Danny Reyes returned to Earth a hero. The president wanted to give him a medal. Talk shows wanted to interview him. Newspapers wanted to tell his story. He refused all of it. There will be time for celebrations after we win, Danny told the reporters who followed him everywhere. Right now, there is work to do. He threw himself into training the next generation of Marines. Thousands of young Americans had volunteered after Phoenix. They came from every state, every background, every walk of life. Danny took them and turned them into warriors. Corporal Katie Morgan had been promoted to sergeant after Catherine 7. She helped Danny with the training, teaching new recruits the tactics that had worked against the Valkyrians. Never give them distance, she told her students. They are better than us at long range. Get close. Get inside their defenses. Make it personal. That is where we win. Private Luis Garcia, who had fought beside Danny on Kethra 7, became an instructor as well. He taught the recruits how to use the powered combat armor, how to breach enemy hulls, how to fight in the chaos of a space station. The Valkyrians are scared of us now, Luis said. They will never admit it, but they are. We showed them that they can bleed. Now we need to show them that they can die. Dr. Hannah Pierce worked around the clock in her laboratory. She had new weapons to build and old weapons to improve. Her kinetic impactors had proven devastating, but she knew the Valkyrians would be looking for countermeasures. We need to stay ahead of them, she told her team. The moment they figure out how to stop one weapon, we need to have 3 more ready to use. Commander Pete Sullivan, now promoted to Admiral, took charge of the defense fleet. He spent long hours in the simulator, running battle scenarios, looking for any advantage. We cannot beat them in a straight fight, Sullivan told his officers. 62 ships against 500 is suicide. So we do not fight straight. We hit them from the sides. We hit them from behind. We make them chase us. We bleed them dry, one ship at a time. Can that actually work, sir? Asked Captain Amy Chun, who had been promoted as well. Sullivan smiled grimly. It has to work. Because it is the only plan we have. 6 weeks passed like 6 days. The enemy fleet entered human sensor range on schedule. 500 warships in perfect formation. A wall of destruction stretching across the void. War Admiral Essex stood on the bridge of his flagship, watching Earth grow larger on his display. It was a beautiful planet, he admitted to himself. Blue oceans, white clouds, green continents. A shame it had to be destroyed, but orders were orders. All ships, prepare for combat, Essex commanded. We will approach in standard formation. Destroy any vessels that oppose us. Then begin bombardment of the planet. Sir, we are detecting human ships in the asteroid belt. How many? Approximately 60 vessels, Admiral. Essex allowed himself a small smile. 60 against 500. The humans were brave, he had to admit. But bravery alone would not save them. Engage and destroy. Show no mercy. The Battle of Seoul had begun. On the bridge of the USS Constitution, Admiral Sullivan watched the enemy fleet approach. This was it. The moment everything had been building toward. The moment that would decide the fate of humanity. He opened a channel to all human ships. This is Admiral Sullivan. You all know why we are here. You all know what is at stake. Behind us is Earth, our home, our families, everyone we have ever loved. If we fail here today, they all die. He paused, letting the words sink in. But we are not going to fail. We are going to fight with everything we have. We are going to show these aliens that humanity does not go quietly into the night. We are going to make them pay for every inch of space they try to take from us. His voice hardened with determination. Remember Phoenix. Remember Kethra 7. Remember who we are and why we fight. Now, let us go out there and kick their teeth in. The cheers from every ship in the fleet could be heard across the void. The final battle had begun.